Meanwhile, Fox News alerted Israel and Iran trading fire overnight with the most strikes we've seen in months.
But President Trump posting on Truth Social just a few minutes ago saying that Israel and Iran are looking to do an immediate ceasefire as, quote, final negotiations on peace are proceeding.
Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst joins us live in Tel Aviv with the latest. Good morning, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. It's been about 3 hours since the last explosions were reported in the Iranian capital of Tehran. The Israelis going on offense after they came under waves of Iranian ballistic missile attacks overnight. This all started yesterday afternoon when the IDF struck the Lebanese capital of Beirut, hitting the Hezbollah stronghold, the Dakhya neighborhood in the southern part of the city. Iranian officials then threatened to target Israel and later launched 4 waves of ballistic missiles toward the northern part of this country, sending hundreds of thousands of people into bomb shelters. As we were reporting here from Tel Aviv, we could see these missiles soaring through the skies of Israel. I was on the phone with President Trump getting his reaction in real time. President Trump told me what I would suggest to Iran: you've shot your missiles, that's enough. Get back to the table and make a deal. The president said this certainly isn't going to help negotiations. Now, Israel, around 4:10 a.m. local time, launched widespread airstrikes across Iran, targeting both the central and western parts of that country, going after many of the air defense systems there. Then early this morning around sunrise, the Houthis from Yemen that are backed by the Iranian regime launched ballistic missiles toward Israel, triggering sirens here in Tel Aviv. And then the Iranians launched more ballistic missiles in 2 separate waves toward this country, sending millions of people into bomb shelters. So quite an eventful 24 hours across the region, and questions about if both sides are willing to cease fire. Guys?
Trey, several things. They're launching these ballistic missiles, and I know that we took out a lot of their ballistic missiles. Where do they stand as far as their arsenal now? And what caused this? Why do you think that Israel and Iran started trading fire all of a sudden?
The president indicated over the weekend the Iranians still have around 20% of their ballistic missile arsenal. The number could be even higher, but it speaks to how dangerous these missiles can be, even if they've been degraded in the aftermath of Operation Epic Fury, that 40-day military operation against the Iranian regime that was carried out alongside Israeli forces. In terms of the current state of affairs and why we are seeing this exchange of fire right now, it comes down to one reason, and that is that the Iranians are trying to tie the issue of Lebanon and their support of the largest proxy they have in the region, Hezbollah, to the broader negotiations with the United States. They say if the Israelis strike Hezbollah, they will strike Israel. And that is why we are seeing this ballistic missile fire toward this country today. Remember, the Israelis have a tiered air defense system, starting with the Iron Dome. It then goes up to David Sling. They have the Arrow 2 and 3 system beyond that. But they've also got U.S. systems on the ground, including Patriot and THAAD missile defense systems that we are told were working to shoot down some of that incoming fire overnight.
Trey, the other thing was the Houthis get involved out of nowhere. You know, we heard they were going to get involved before. They haven't. The one worry the Saudis have, one of the many worries, is that they'll shut down the Red Sea. And according to Arab News, they announced that the Houthis claim missile attack on Israel and announced Red Sea shipping ban. Have you heard anything more about that?
Yes, the Houthis have announced that they are effectively closing Bab al-Mandab, which is the equivalent of the Red Sea Strait of Hormuz. When we look at the 2 shipping lanes, you have the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz that goes into the Gulf of Oman, that has been the main focus of Iranian aggression throughout the past 2 months, and that is the area where you have the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports. But then when you go further west to the Red Sea, you have the Bab al-Mandab, which is largely considered the gateway to the Red Sea. And the Houthis have the ability to launch missiles and drones at this area and disrupt international shipping lanes. It's around 12% of the world's shipping that goes through this area. And if they're effective in this effort, it could make the negotiations even more complicated. The Iranians are running out of levers to pull. They understand that the U.S. naval blockade is crippling their economy. They also understand that the U.S. and Israeli militaries remain on high alert if this military operation unravels into a broader conflict like we saw earlier this year. And so Iran is trying to flex what they have left of their proxies in both Yemen and in Lebanon. That is something that both U.S. and Israeli officials are not going to allow. The president has indicated both Israel and Iran are interested in returning to ceasefire. Now, the question is if both sides will be willing to do so in the hours ahead. If they are unwilling to do so, both Israeli and Iranian officials have indicated in separate press briefings this morning that they are prepared for days of battle ahead. Again, President Trump indicated in a call with Fox News overnight he prefers the diplomatic solution here. He is trying to reach a deal with the Iranian regime that would do a few separate things. One, it would open the Strait of Hormuz, that critical international shipping lane. It would address Iran's growing nuclear ambitions and the enriched material that remains in their country. And finally, it would de-escalate tension across the region. The president is looking to avoid a scenario where there is an endless war in the region. He is trying to reach a deal with the Iranian regime. So far, there have been a number of points challenging to reach at the negotiating table, but the president has these top negotiators, including Special Envoys Witkoff and Kushner, who were able to reach an agreement between Israel and Gaza to end the war there about a year and a half ago. And now the president is trying to do the same thing while encouraging Gulf countries to normalize ties with Israel and create a sense of stability across the Middle East.
Great job out there, Trey. I would just say we had the chief of staff for the Crown Prince, exiled Crown Prince. And he said if a deal were to happen, they're going to be in a worse spot as far as the people there. I understand that the interests are different when it comes to our national security and what the people may say. But the people of Iran are saying, you know, this is going to put them in a worse position if it did, because it's the same regime in place. True, there's different leaders in place, but it's the same organization structure. So
it takes about 2 weeks. I think the president's got to finish the job, and he's got sentiments in the White House. You know, some in the White House don't want that, but most Republican senators on Capitol Hill would fully support it. You know, you hear Roger Wicker, head of Armed Services, and Senator Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham. The president knows what he has to do, knows the arsenal, had a good chance to see what's happened over the last 8 weeks. Now they stupidly have brought out all their launchers. Now they're exposed. And now with Israel, and I think they have a game plan ready to go. I think the American people would support going 2 weeks to finish the job.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.